Hi all, let's take a look at fallacies of relevance today. Okay, when we talk about fallacy basically means a misconstructed idea, an argument that contains a mistake. Well, let's take a look at logical fallacy. Logical fallacy basically is also known as fallacy, is basically an argument that contains mistake in reasoning. So often people can get confused with a real fallacy with logical fallacy. When we talk about fallacy of relevance, the mistakes in reasoning actually occur because of the premise. So these premises are usually logical but irrelevant to the conclusion. Then fallacy of relevance would happen. When we talk about relevance, relevance basically refers to a statement that is technically relevant to another statement if it would be, if true, provide at least some sort of evidence that the second statement is true or false. So when we have two statements, these two statements are actually interdependent, and one statement would actually prove that the other statement is either true or false. So if it noticed in the slide, relevance has got nothing to do with truth. So if A can be relevant to B, even if A and or B is false. So for example, you would have heard of this. If I say all tires are triangle, then rubber tires are also triangles. It basically means that when A is irrelevant or related to B, therefore B becomes part of A. Arguments usually commits this fallacy of relevance where the premises provide no clear evidence of fact that the conclusion is actually true. Now, let's take a look at the different types of fallacies of relevance. For this course, we would be looking at 11 different types of fallacies. And for today's lesson, what we'll do is we'll focus on the first 7 fallacies of relevance, namely the personal attack, also known as ad hominem. Second, attacking the motive. Third, look who's talking. Fourth, two wrongs make a right. Fifth, scare tactics. Sixth, appeal to pity. Seven, bandwagon argument. So these 7 fallacies will be of our concern today. So let's start with the first one. From the word itself, personal attack or ad hominem, you basically understand that the fallacy or the argument is based or heavily biased on attacking the person rather than the argument. So the key concept here for this fallacy is basically attacking the person rather than attacking the claim. So if you take a look at the description here, this fallacy actually dismisses or rejects an argument by just attacking the person that makes the argument rather than attacking that claim that this person makes. So when you take a look at the common pattern of how this fallacy is constructed, basically we start with portraying that X, this person, is a bad person. Therefore, X's argument, this person's argument, must be faulty or wrong. Therefore, we cannot accept it. So let's take a look at one example. So when we talk about personal attack fallacy, let's take a look at number 1 here. A man who once served a 3-year jail sentence for robbery has witnessed a murder. So here we have a man with something bad, a bad record, because he used to serve a 3-year jail sentence, and this man actually witnessed or saw a murder. So when he is brought to the court to give his testimony as an eyewitness, the prosecutor, the lawyer, asked the judge to not admit the testimony, to not take in the testimony, his words, because he is a robber. He first portrays that robbers are bad, they are not trustworthy, therefore his words are also not accepted. So the problem here with this fallacy is that if you take a look at it technically, even being a former robber, he can still tell the truth. So the prosecutor has committed the personal attack fallacy in this case. Now, let's take a look at the second example. I don't think Darren Wong is a reliable candidate for the next elections. So this is a good claim when you say that Darren Wong is not a reliable candidate for the next election. But you should always give a concrete reasoning to support his candidature. But in this case, they use a very flawed reasoning where they go personal. They go by saying that he recently got divorced. So if you see, even though he recently got divorced, but it's not a criteria for Darren Wong to not be a good leader, to be a good political leader. He could be a bad husband, assumingly, but that does not make him a bad candidate. But if you take a look at this pattern of argument, this person commits the fallacy of personal attack, because by saying that how can we expect him to keep his campaign promises when he could not even keep his marriage promises? So these two things are not related. So what does the person do? The person attacks Darren Wong's personality and therefore says that he is a bad candidate for the next elections. Right? So I hope that you're a little bit clearer with personal attack fallacy. So people who commit this fallacy actually takes a very hard stand on the person's personality, on his or her character, rather than what he or she says. So are you clear now? All right. Now let's take a look at attacking the motive. Attacking the motive is the second fallacy. This fallacy occurs when an arguer actually criticizes a person's motivation, his intention for offering a particular claim or argument, rather than examining the worth of the argument or claim itself. So what do we mean here? If we take a look at the first fallacy, we attack the person rather than his claim. In the second fallacy, attacking the motive, we attack the motive, the intention of the speaker, the hidden agenda behind his claims, rather than looking at his claims per se. So the pattern would be X, the person, is biased or has questionable motives. Therefore, X argument or claim should be rejected. Now, let's take a look at the examples. I'll give you a minute to read both the examples and try to justify why these situations actually employ the attacking the motive fallacy. Now, let's take a look at the first example. Let me read it out for you. My neighbor, Mr. Johnson, claims, so there's a claim here, claims that Emerald University is the best university in Malaysia. So that's quite true. Could be true, could be wrong, but it's a good claim. So Emerald University EU is the best university in Malaysia, right? And the reason to support the claim comes, and I should study there after I've gotten my SPM results. Okay, but the reason is still lacking. Let's go to the next sentence. Of course, he's saying that because he is the marketing manager for the university. Well, this is actually attacking the motive because the person claims that Mr. Johnson is saying that Emerald University is the best university in Malaysia simply because Mr. Johnson is the marketing manager there. So that's not really a proper way to construct an argument. We sense some fallacy there. The best way to do it is perhaps give a reason why Emerald University is the best university or why it's not the best university rather than going by the motive of the speaker. Now let's take a look at the second one. The sales girl kept telling me that the dress looked fabulous on me. So that's a compliment, that's also a claim, and insisted that I should buy it. But the reasoning here is a little bit faulty, where we go to fallacy. I don't think she really meant it. I think she just wanted to earn commission for the dress she could sell. So here, the speaker actually questions the intention of the sales girl. So is she genuinely saying that the dress looks fabulous on him or her, or is she just simply doing it for a hidden agenda to earn some commission? So when you have, or when you face this kind of situation, you can sense some fallacy there. So this type of situations deal with attacking the motive fallacy. Yeah, that's the second one. Now let's take a look at the third one. The third fallacy here would be look who's talking. Look who's talking is a common fallacy that most of us commit. Well, basically when an arguer rejects another person's argument or claim, it's because of that person fails to practice what he or she preaches. Well, you've heard of the claim, practice what you preach. So in this case, when this fallacy happens, the person fails to do what he or she asks you to do. Therefore, you use it as a false argument, a fallacy. So in this case, look who's talking follows this kind of pattern. You bring down the argument by saying that X, the person, fails to follow his or her own advice. Therefore, why should I follow? Therefore, X's claim on the argument or X's claim should totally be rejected. This is quite common with kids. So, for example, if you have a father who smokes and he advises his son to not smoke, the son can commit the fallacy of look who's talking when the son actually says this, that look, you don't follow what you say, therefore I will not follow what you say too. So that's look who's talking. Now let's take a look at the examples of look who's talking. I can give you a minute to read on it. Now, let's take a look at the first example. I don't need to stop smoking just because my doctor tells me to. He smokes and won't stop either. So in this case, the person is actually using the fallacy of look who's talking, because he claims that he doesn't have to smoke because the doctor actually asked him to stop smoking, but the doctor does not follow what he preaches. So therefore, no point of arguing with the doctor's advice. Now let's take a look at the second one. Look who's talking. You say I shouldn't become an alcoholic because it will hurt me and my family. So this is the claim, but the reasoning. Yet you yourself, you're an alcoholic, and therefore your argument can't be worth listening to. Now let's take a look at the third example. Yesterday, my mom told me to stop buying shoes as I have enough shoes for every occasion. So that's a sound advice, but let's take a look at the reasoning. So this daughter perhaps is quite smart by using look who's talking fallacy when she says, but let's take a look at the shoes closet. It's mostly filled with her shoes, the mom's shoes. And just now she told me that she's going out to buy yet another pair of shoes for Susan's wedding. So can you see here? The mom actually requests the daughter to not buy any more shoes because the daughter assumingly has more shoes, but the mom actually does the same mistake or the same crime when she goes on buying the shoes and has the shoe closet filled with her own shoes. So in this case, the daughter very smartly uses look who's talking fallacy to dispute the mom's argument. Now, let's take a look at the fourth fallacy. Two wrongs make a right. So you would have heard of the famous saying, two wrongs do not make a right. So in this case, the fallacy is the reverse of the saying. It says that two wrongs make a right. So in this fallacy, the arguer actually attempts to justify, to make a wrongful act right by claiming that some other act is just as bad or even worse than his or her act. It's just like when you advise a child to say that, hey, you can't eat more than 2 donuts today. And the child would straight away compare his brother by saying that, but brother ate more than 2 donuts today, so why can't I eat more than 2 donuts also? So it's a bit difficult to make this right because they really sound correct. So the general pattern of this fallacy, number one, it is claimed that person B would do X to A. Therefore, it is also acceptable for person A to do X back to person B. So let's see. I'll give you 1 minute to read the examples for this fallacy. All right, let's take a look at the first example. Bill has borrowed Jane's expensive pen, but found he didn't return it. He tells himself that it is okay to keep it, since she would have done the same if she has taken his. So here, if you see, the act of not returning the borrowed pen is wrong. But how does Bill make it arguable? Bill actually justifies his wrongdoing by saying that if Jane borrowed his pen, she would do the same. So why must I return the pen? So here the first wrong is him not returning the pen. He gives the second wrong as Jane not returning, therefore says that these two now is equivalent and makes it a right. Now let's take a look at the second one. It looks like the waiter forgot to charge us for the expensive bottle of champagne. Let's just leave. After all, if he overcharged us, I doubt he would chase us down to give us our money back that we overpaid. So in this situation, this person basically knows that there is a wrong here where they did not return the change given by the waiter because the waiter forgot to charge for the expensive bottle of champagne. So technically they should have just returned the money or asked the waiter to include that in the bill. But how does this person make it right? This person says that, well, it's okay, it's all right, because if at all the restaurant owner or the waiter overcharged, wrongly charged us, he will never come back and give us back the money. So why must we? Okay, now let's take a look at the third example. Jill is horrified by the way the public beat up the robbers, killing them. Bill says that the killing is fine since those robbers do not have any qualms about killing their victims. Well, this is quite common scenario or justification given by people who take law at hand. You know, when in cases you catch a robber, of course the robber has done some bad things, and sometimes some robbers even kill their victims. But that doesn't justify or that doesn't give you the authority to beat them up or even kill them. But Jill actually says it is okay because they do the same to the public. Therefore, we can now kill them. So these two wrongs can never make a right. But in this fallacy, this arguer tries to make these two wrongs a right. Now, let's take a look at this fallacy, scare tactics. Scare tactics are quite easy to detect when a person is actually making an argument, because scare tactic is usually used with fear. So fear is actually the major tool in coming up with this fallacy. So scare tactics is used when fear, not based on evidence or reasoning. So we do not have any evidence or reasoning, but we just use or employ fear as the primary motivator to get other people to do what we want, either to accept our idea, our proposition, or even our conclusion. So they are technically forced by fear in order to accept the idea. They might not accept it willingly. Scare tactics generally follow this kind of pattern. So number one, if you don't accept X as true, something horrible or terrible will happen to you. Therefore, X must be true. Scare tactics are common with parents dealing with children. They usually say things like this: if you don't eat your food now, I will not give you your toys. Or if you don't do your homework, you don't get to play outside. So when you use these kind of tactics, what happens is that the child will have to follow the idea or the instructions from the parents for the fear of not being able to play outside, for instance. Now let's take a look at the examples. So we have 5 examples here. I can give you about 1 minute to read through and try to digest how scare tactics are being used in arguments. Now, let's take a look at the first example. You must believe that God exists. So you can see that there's a sign of forcing here. Why? After all, if you do not accept the existence of God, here's where the scare factor comes in. Then you will burn in hell. So a follower of a specific religion will have to believe the existence of God in fear of burning in hell. So there's no clear evidence or reasoning given in order for you to believe the existence of God. Rather, the fear of burning in hell is being imposed on you in order for you to believe in the statement. Now let's take a look at the second example. If you continue to drink, you will die early as your father did. So in this case, the fear of consuming alcohol is given or is equated with dying. So if you drink or if you consume alcohol, then you die. So a person is actually being reminded of what will happen in future. So the fear is perhaps making you to accept the idea. Now let's take a look at the third example. If you cannot graduate from high school, then you will live in poverty for the rest of your life. So here, the idea of not graduating is equated with the fear of living in poverty, of being poor for the rest of your life. So the person will have to think that if he graduates, he would live better. So instead of avoiding a poor future, he or she then accepts the idea that he or she has to graduate from high school. Now let's take a look at the fourth example. So this is quite common in politics, So voting for person X is the same as voting for the terrorist. So here, this person actually gives you the idea that when you vote for him, you will be giving yourself to this terrorist who will rule for the country. So in this case, you're just giving an idea or a sort of perception that he is as equally bad as living under the rule of a terrorist. So instead, if this person actually tries to persuade you to not vote for him by giving you the fear that it would be really bad if he comes to power. Now let's take a look at number 5. If we don't go to war, our country will be destroyed. So in this case, the fear of the country being destroyed actually motivates you to go to war. Now let's take a look at the 6th fallacy, appeal to pity. Well, this fallacy occurs when an arguer attempts to evoke feelings of pity or compassion, when such feelings are not logically relevant to the arguer's conclusion. Well, it's quite easy. When you make an argument, the arguer actually tries to create this feeling of pity, could be to the issue, could be to himself, and make you believe in what he or she wants you to believe in. So in this case, it's quite normal when someone tries to win support for an argument or an idea by exploiting his or her opponent's feelings. It could be a feeling of pity or even guilt. It is a specific kind of appeal to the emotion. Let's see. Here we have about 3 examples of appeal to pity fallacy. I'll give you about 1 minute to go through them. All right. Now let's take a look at the first example. Let me read it out for you. A snatch thief who was sentenced to 10 years of jail for causing grievous injuries to his victim. So that's a snatch thief, and he is facing a 10-year sentence for causing severe injuries to his victim. So this snatch thief actually appeals to the judge. Appealed to the judge to reduce his sentence as he was the sole breadwinner. He claimed that his wife, 2 young children, and an 80-year-old mother were fully dependent on him. So here, what this thief tries to do is that he tries to make the judge feel pity for his condition. So he claims that he is the only person who is earning for the family. So when he goes to jail for 10 years, what's going to happen to the condition of the 2 kids, his old mother and his wife, who are fully dependent on him? So if the judge falls for this fallacy of pity, then he can reduce the sentence. But in real example, we cannot do that because it is not justice. If any other man with no dependents or is not the sole breadwinner gets a 10-year jail sentence, then this snatch thief, despite his pity factor, should also get a 10-year of jail. So let's take a look at the second example. An undergraduate student who cheated in the final exam has pleaded to the disciplinary board to not expel him because he is in his final semester. He also added that his mother, a widow who has been supporting him financially, would be devastated if she knew that her son is expelled from the university for cheating in the examination. Well, let's take a look at this example. In real life situation, if you cheat in the university exam and the rule says that you're supposed to expel the student, then everybody must follow the rules. So despite being in your final semester and despite being in a broken family, or despite being in a family that does not give you financial support, you are still facing the same punishment. But this student here appeals or pleads to the disciplinary board by using the pity factor. He appeals to pity by saying that he is already in his final semester. So what's going to happen if he gets expelled? The 2 or 3 years of study is wasted. And he also says that he has a widow mother, single mother, and this person has been supporting him financially, and she would be heartbroken. Therefore, he should not be expelled. But this is a clear-cut example of appeal to pity, because it wouldn't work that way. No matter in which year you are, no matter what kind of family background you have to face the music. Now let's take a look at the third example. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, look at this miserable man. So pity, word of pity is there, yeah? Miserable, suffering. In a wheelchair. So there's already a sense of pity for this man, and unable to use his legs. So this man has some physical disability. So that is the pity factor. So could such a man be really guilty of embezzlement? Embezzlement here means taking money, yeah? So can this person actually misuse or take money from his own institution? It's not possible, right? That's how the prosecutor appeals to pity. But in real life, why can't a person in wheelchair be possible of taking some money from his institution or from his workplace? It's very possible. But he, the prosecutor, tries to get some pity factor from the jury and maybe reduce or prove his innocence with that disability. Now, let's take a look at the seventh fallacy, the last one for this lesson. I will cover the rest in the next lesson. This fallacy is called the bandwagon fallacy. Okay, so the bandwagon fallacy occurs when an argument plays on a person's desire to be popular, accepted, or valued rather than appealing to logically relevant reasons or evidence. So in this case, you can usually say or follow trend. You can say that body piercing or tattoo, tattoo is a trend, therefore I should also get one. So when you want to get one, you just want to be or jump into the bandwagon, just want to follow the trend, rather than giving out examples or reasons. Maybe you want to say that having a tattoo actually gives me identity. Rather than arguing like that, you say that I just want to have a tattoo because it's cool, because everyone has it. So what? What is the reason behind it? So for bandwagon, you just want to be in the trend. You just want to be popular, accepted, or even valued. So you don't give proper reasoning. So bandwagon argument generally follows this pattern. Most or a selected group of people believe or do something. Therefore, you should believe or do that something. So this argument is based on this fallacy that it usually bears a format similar to everyone else believes this, therefore it must be true, or everyone else does this, so it must be right. So there is a sort of a generalization here. So the example of bandwagon is quite common with children. So for example, you could say or have kids saying this: everyone else has a Frozen themed bag, why can't I have one? Or everyone else has a green color pencil case, therefore I should have one too. So when you talk about children, they're prone to invoking the bandwagon fallacy when they argue with their parents. They will often claim that everyone at their school has a certain product, like I said, or is allowed to engage in a risky activity, and therefore they should be allowed to. Remember the times where you have to argue with your mom, saying that everyone else is going for the school's trip, so why can't I go? Now let's take a look at this simple example. So here we have Jenny and the mom. So Jenny says, I would like to get an arm tattoo, mom. That's okay, that's a claim. So let's see how does the mom tries to refute the claim. No, Jenny. So she's firm. She says no. I don't think it's appropriate. So that is a reason for the no, because she says it's not appropriate. So Jenny is still a student in a school, so it's not appropriate to have an arm tattoo. Furthermore, the mom provides further extension to her claim, saying that it is against your school's rules, so you can't do it. So the mom is quite good in presenting her argumentation. So let's see, how does Jenny supports her claim of getting a tattoo? She says, but mom, everyone, can you see the word everyone? So there you have the fallacy of bandwagon being exhibited. Everyone in school is getting one. So I don't think why you shouldn't allow me of getting one too. So mom is smarter, says this, honey, if everyone is jumping off a cliff, would you follow too?